Chapter 1. The Game That Shouldn't Exist. In the dead center of Harmony Creek stood the Spencer Mansion, an imposing structure with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. It was rumored that the last owner went insane within its walls, though what really happened was lost to time. One day a group of teenagers decided to explore the abandoned house. Among them were best friends Jake and Lisa, along with their friends Mark, Sarah, and Tom. "I bet there isn't anything in here," Tom said loudly, kicking at a loose floorboard. "Let's just get this over with." As if to prove him wrong, the floor gave way beneath his foot and he disappeared into the dark hall below. Guys," Mark began nervously, "maybe we should leave. This doesn't seem like a good idea." "Oh, come on, Mark," Sarah scoffed. "Where's your sense of adventure?" She leaned over the hole, trying to peer into its dark depths. "Besides, I don't think Tom's in any danger. He probably just landed on something soft, like a pile of mattresses." "Yeah," Lisa added with a smile. "Probably just a big pile of mattresses." They climbed down after him, and sure enough, there was Tom sitting on a pile of mattresses. They spent the next few hours exploring the rest of the basement and eventually came across a door hidden behind some old boxes. "Hey, check this out," Jake said, pushing it open. "Another room. What's in here could make this place way more interesting. Come on guys, let's go see." As they entered the room, their eyes were immediately drawn to a large wooden box sitting in the middle of the floor. The box was ornately carved and seemed to glow with an eerie light. "What do you think it is?" Mark asked, his voice echoing in the silent room. "I don't know," Lisa replied, cautiously approaching the box. "But I'm guessing it's not good." As she reached out to touch it, Jake stopped her. "Wait, let's check for traps first. You never know what could happen in a place like this." They searched the area for any signs of danger, but found nothing. With no apparent traps, Jake lifted the lid of the box. Inside was a board game. The box had no name, no instructions. There was also a single sheet of paper inside, and written on it were the following words: "Once you start, you must finish." "Huh," Lisa said, tilting her head. "This is weird. What kind of game is this?" Tom picked up the box and shook it. "Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough. Let's play it." They arranged the game pieces on the table and started playing. At first, everything seemed normal. They rolled the dice and moved their pieces around the board, making conversation and laughing. However, as the game progressed, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. The laughter died down and they grew quiet as they noticed something strange happening. The dice were rolling on their own. At first, it was just a slight movement, but then the dice began rolling across the table, crashing to the floor and disappearing into the darkness beneath the table. Then Lisa vanished. "Guys, where did she go?" Tom asked, his voice trembling. I don't know," Mark stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "She was right here a second ago." Suddenly, they heard Lisa's voice echoing from nowhere. "You have to keep playing. You have to finish the game." They all looked around frantically, searching for Lisa, but she was nowhere to be found. The game pieces suddenly flew off the table, crashing to the floor. The board glowed faintly, and then the room shifted and swirled until it solidified again. The pieces had returned to their places on the board, and Mark's turn was now. "No, Mark cried, backing away from the table. "Don't want to play anymore. Please stop this." He tried to move away from the table, but his legs wouldn't move. He tried to scream, but his throat was constricted. He tried to speak, but only a strangled squeak came out. In horror, he realized he couldn't move, speak, or scream. The game continued. Sarah was up next, but before she could make her move, the walls around them began to shift and change, and when they stopped moving, they weren't in the basement anymore. They were in the forest outside the house. Mark wanted to call out to them, to warn them about the game, but no sound came out of his mouth. He watched helplessly as they walked toward the edge of the forest, unaware of the danger that awaited them. Suddenly, a dark figure emerged from the trees and lunged for them. Mark screamed, but his voice was lost in the wind. He watched in horror as the others were pulled into the darkness, and then it was his turn. The game continued. Jake was up next, and he rolled the dice. One second it was night, the next it was morning. When he looked back, he saw that his friends were gone. He was alone. He could hear the birds chirping merrily outside. The sun was shining through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. He was alone and he was scared. Then he felt a cold dread creep up his spine, and he knew he had to do one thing, and that was finish the game. But how could he finish the game if his friends were trapped somewhere in this endless maze? The answer was simple. He had to sacrifice one of them. They played on, and Mark slowly lost his mind. Finally, it was his turn again, and he took a deep breath and let out a shout. This time, his voice came out clear and strong. "Guys, please listen to me. We have to stop playing. This game is dangerous. We don't know where it will take us next. I don't want to find out." But they didn't listen. They were too caught up in the game. "Come on, Mark," Jake said impatiently. "It's your turn." Mark hesitated, then rolled the dice. The room spun, and everything went black. When he woke up, he was lying on the ground. He sat up and looked around. He was in a dark, dank dungeon. There was a single flickering torch on the wall that cast long shadows on a damp stone floor. In front of him was a heavy iron gate with bars, and through one of the bars, he could see a staircase leading up into the darkness. He called out to the others, but his voice echoed back at him, mocking his fear. He was alone. Again, the game continued. It was Sarah's turn, and as she stepped forward to roll the dice, the floor beneath her feet turned to glass. She gasped as she looked down and saw that she was standing on a narrow ledge high above the ground. "Help!" she cried, reaching out to Mark. "Please help me." But Mark couldn't help her. He was trapped in the dungeon. The game continued. It was Jake's turn, and he reached for the dice. They were cold and hard under his fingertips. But as he rolled them, a sudden surge of energy shot through him, and the dice flew out of his hands, bouncing off the walls before landing in a pile at Sarah's feet. "What?" Jake shouted, staring at the dice in disbelief. "How did that happen?" Sarah, however, didn't have time to answer his question. The floor beneath her feet began to crumble, and she lost her balance. She screamed as she fell. And then it was Jake's turn again. He reached for the dice, but the board moved itself. A final message appeared on it. "One must stay behind," it read. They all stared at each other for a moment, their faces pale and drawn. They knew what they had to do. "Who will stay behind?" the board asked. They all looked at Jake, their eyes pleading. They knew who he would choose. "I'm sorry," Jake whispered, his voice breaking, "but I have to do this. I have to finish the game." With trembling hands, he reached out and rolled the dice. The game ended. Lisa returned. So did Mark. So did Sarah. But Jake was gone. The board sat closed on the table, waiting for new players. And in the attic of the abandoned house, Jake's voice whispered, "Once you start, you must finish."